Let's look at corals. We mentioned corals as one of the fishing grounds. We mentioned it as one of the productive systems in tropical oceans. If you remember, we had cold water here, so more phytoplankton, upwelling, etc. Here is the warm water, which is typically less productive. And yet, this is called a coral triangle with very high biodiversity because corals are a very good recycling system. As I said, they are the forests of the ocean. So this is just showing the number of coral building coral genera, more than 50 here, 40, 30, 20 down to 10, and there is the 18 degrees centigrade barrier beyond which the tropical corals don't grow. So purple shading indicates areas of low diversity in coral species. Nonetheless, these are warm water corals, reef building corals. Okay, why do we say reef building? Because there are cold corals which grow deeper in the water in cold waters at high latitudes. They are not reef building; they are just individual corals. Nonetheless, corals only grow within the tropics where average annual temperature is greater than 18 degrees centigrade. So you can see Indian Ocean provides lots of regions with greater than 18 degrees centigrade. So you get nice, including all the way in the Red Sea and into the Gulf of Mexico. These are some of the northernmost regions where you get corals. Okay. Reef building corals. What's happening? As we said, some of the coral fish are overexploited. Many corals are damaged. They used to easily blow up corals with dynamites to catch fish, which is, I think, banned. It's definitely banned now. But coral bleaching is essentially when the water gets too warm beyond their tolerance, which is happening more and more. Can happen naturally during La Nina. So if you think about, well, El Nino and La Nina, this is the region that gets warm during an El Nino, and this region gets warmer during a La Nina. Remember, La Nina is colder here and warmer here. El Nino is colder here and warmer here, right? So when the temperatures get too warm, it's called bleaching. So you can see the color of a normal coral and a bleached coral. So it does look whitish. What happens, as I mentioned before in another podcast, corals are little polyps that grow and they offer habitats for zooxanthellae to attach to them, and they have pigments that give the corals colors, and they photosynthesize. They take out the carbon dioxide of the animals that live in the coral, including the coral itself, and generate oxygen. When temperatures get too warm, those algae die, and the coral goes back to its native color, which is just the calcium carbonate shell, right? It's just a polyp that's building a structure which has got no color. So coral bleaching is essentially when the symbiotic algae that live on the corals and provide the color end up dying. Okay, so that's what is coral bleaching. Now the question is, we will see this again in the next chapter. Is the coral bleaching frequency increasing? It turns out that large parts of the Great Barrier Reef and other coral reefs in the West Pacific are not recovering. What happens? Basically, El Nino would create a warm situation in some places, and La Nina would create warm waters in other places, which would cause natural coral bleaching. But global warming is acting on top of that. So if El Nino hits, they are not recovering as fast because of global warming on top, or they are not recovering at all. So this is kind of not a good situation. But there are some corals in the Caribbean and so on which are somehow doing well or even thriving, even in the Red Sea, I think, despite the warming. So there are some efforts to try to understand genetically what is it in these corals that makes them survive. That's again our idea of a biological loophole, right? Nature makes the rules. El Nino, global warming. Well, global warming we are making, but naturally there have been warming and cooling before as well. and then biology finds the loopholes. So some corals have found a way to survive or even thrive in warmer waters. Maybe if you are smart, some of you kids will become biologists and find a way to move the genes from the coral that's doing well to to a coral that's not doing so well and make them all thrive, right? We don't know what kind of solutions will come in the future, but hopefully there will be many um, solutions. I missed a slide there. Maybe I'll show it in the next podcast, but unfortunately I'll have to stop this here. That slide is basically about marine heat waves, so maybe I'll put it in the next chapter.